Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma, and we are continuing our study of the Olivet Discourse. We have been focused for a good long time now on Matthew 25, 1 to 13. The dominant view concerning the Olivet Discourse is that it is a discussion of two different subjects. Now, the dispensationalists reject that. Essentially, they only have like 4 verses in the entirety of the Olivet Discourse as a discussion of AD 70. That's found in Luke chapter 21, 20 and following. And the entirety of the rest of the discourse, they claim, is about the coming of the Lord and the end of the current Christian age. Well, of course, that's very presuppositional. It assumes that that the apostles were asking about the end of the Christian age. They assume that Jesus was, or that the apostles were asking about a coming of the Lord as a 5'5" Jewish man out of heaven. So all these presuppositions are at work, even in the dispensational world. Well, in the amillennial and postmillennial world, it is believed that when Jesus predicted the fall of Jerusalem and the temple, that the apostles were confused, that they mistakenly linked that coming destruction with the end of time, the end of the Christian age. Now, I've dealt with that extensively in the past, and the flawed presuppositions that are at work there, but you need to go back and watch some of those videos, because it's very important that you understand how flawed the presuppositions are that are read into the text by the commentators. Okay, so we've been examining for a good long while now Matthew 25, 1 to 13. I have shared with you that this parable about the coming of the bridegroom for the wedding is taken directly from the Old Covenant. You know, stunningly, stunningly, just this last week, I had an individual absolutely deny that the wedding was involved Israel. And he said, I'm a false teacher for saying that. Well, that's amazing, because according to Hosea chapter 2, 19 to 23, according to Isaiah 62, according to Isaiah 54, it was Old Covenant Israel that was to be remarried at the coming of the Lord. I mean, this shows how desperate some people are to avoid the truth of covenant eschatology. So, we have Jesus giving this parable about the coming of the Lord for the wedding. Now, I've spent a good little bit of time showing you passage after passage from the Old Testament, passage after passage from the New Testament, that shows us that the coming of the Lord for the wedding is absolutely, undeniably posited at the time of the judgment of Old Covenant Jerusalem. Just go back and look at last week's videos. What I want to do this morning is to change the focus of our examination of Matthew 25, 1 to 13, all the while staying very focused on Matthew 25, 1 to 13. I want you to notice that in so many of Jesus' parables, he introduces them by saying, the kingdom of heaven is like. So, when we find in Matthew chapter 21 the parable of the vineyard and the vineyard workers, and it's the kingdom of heaven is like, when we find in Matthew 22 the parable of the wedding, the kingdom of heaven is like, we have to understand the absolute interrelationship, the inextricable bond between the fulfillment of these parables and the coming of the kingdom. Now, look, the dispensationalists say, well, you know, Jesus came saying, the time is fulfilled. The kingdom of heaven has drawn near. John the Baptizer came saying, the kingdom of heaven has drawn near. Repent. Matthew 3, verse 2. And yet, we are told by the dispensationalists, because of the Jewish unbelief, the kingdom offer had to be withdrawn and the kingdom was postponed. Now here's what's so ironic and what's interesting and fascinating and revealing about this. The amillennialist and the postmillennialist, boy, they point the finger at the dispensationalists and they castigate them. There is no postponement of the kingdom. And listen, the Old Testament is very, very clear. The kingdom was not going to be postponed. In Psalms chapter 2, the Lord said, why do the heathen rage? Why do the nations, why do the kings of the earth set themselves in array against the Lord and against his anointed? He who sits in the heaven will laugh. He will hold them in derision, saying, yet. And that little three-letter word, yet, is one of the most powerful words to be found anywhere. And what it conveys to us in that prophecy of Psalms chapter 2 is that in spite of the rebellion of the Jews against the offer, in spite of Jesus' offer of the kingdom and the Jewish rejection as a whole, not the righteous remnant, but as a whole, the Lord looked at their rebellion, he looked at their rejection and said, so what? I'm going to do what I said I would do when I said I would do it. He who sits in the heavens will laugh. He will hold them in derision, saying, yet have I set my king on my holy hill Zion. So there's a passage that tells us emphatically, that God would laugh at the Jewish rejection. Number two, in Isaiah chapter 42, we are told he, that is Messiah, will not fail. Will not fail until he has set judgment in the earth. Psalms 89. We have the prophecy of the Lord setting the seed of David on the throne of David, and God said, I will not alter the word that has gone out of my mouth. Listen, if you set the time for something, and the time comes, but instead of doing it at the appointed time, you postpone it for 2,000 years, I'm sorry, folks, that's an alteration of the plan. Very quickly, let me share an anecdote with you. My very first formal public debate in 1983, my dispensational opponent, a friend of mine, I got up and addressed his argument of the postponement of the kingdom. And I made the point, folks, John the Baptizer said the kingdom was near. Jesus said the kingdom was near. A 2,000-year postponement is an alteration of the plan. I cited Psalms 89. I cited Isaiah 42. I cited Psalms chapter 2. And he gets up there and he says, well, what my friend Don fails to realize is that just because the kingdom was postponed for so far 2,000 years, that's not actually an alteration of the plan. And I'm sitting at my table going, wait, what? Huh? Did I just hear that? So I get up, and by the way, his name is Don as well. I get up and I say, well, my friend Don says a changing of the time, even by 2,000 years, is not truly an alteration of the plan. So I said, let's imagine this. I said, let's imagine that Don and his lovely wife say they're going to take a trip to Hawaii. Now they're poor, so they have to start planning. But they set a date for 5 years from that date, and they say, in 5 years, we are going to go to Hawaii. 2 years passes, 3 years, 4 years. 4 years, 11 months, 29 days pass, and Don walks in and says, honey, boy, I hate to tell you this, but the motor and the transmission both in our car just cratered, and it's going to take all the money that we've saved to fix it. So we don't get to leave for Hawaii tomorrow. And it's going to take us another 5 to 7 years to save up enough money to go. Now, honey, this is not an alteration of our plan. This is not a changing of anything. We're still going to go, but it's not an alteration. I said, you know, folks, let me ask you a question. And his wife was in the audience. I said, do you think Don's wife would accept his statement that said this is not a change of plans? I said, you know very good and well she would not accept that excuse and that storyline. And so this morning, in this video, I just want you to see that when Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. Now 5 of them wise, 5 were foolish. Those who were foolish took their lamps and took no oil with them, but the wise took oil in their vessels with their lamps. But while the bridegroom was delayed, folks, he didn't delay 2,000 years. But watch this. They all slumbered and slept. And at midnight a cry was heard, behold, the bridegroom is coming, go out to meet him. Now once the message was sent out, okay, once the declaration was made, the bridegroom is coming, folks, there was no more delay. There was no alteration of the plan. There was no postponement of the wedding. When the cry went out, the wedding was at hand. And thus, when Hebrews chapter 10, 37 tells us, and now, in a very, very little while, the one who is coming will come and will not delay. That's Matthew chapter 25. The bridegroom is coming. And when James says, James chapter 5, the coming of the Lord has drawn near, that's the call. The bridegroom is coming. And when in Revelation chapter 22, the Spirit and the bride say, come, and Jesus says, behold, I come quickly. That's the declaration. The bridegroom is coming. No delay. No postponement. No postponement of the kingdom. No postponement of the wedding, because you see, folks, the coming of the kingdom is the coming of the wedding. I want you to listen to me very carefully. However long you postpone the wedding, you postpone the kingdom. I hope you'll catch the power of that. Hey, listen, do not forget our March 2021 3-book special, U.S. orders only. Go to my website, donkpreston.com, bibleprophecy.com. Order the books. Save yourself over $25. Now look, the printer has been extremely slow getting our orders of inventory to us. We had a good supply on hand, but your response to this 3-book special has just been fantastic. Once again, we were caught a little bit flat-footed. So for all of those of you who go ahead and place orders, okay, when our supply comes in, we're going to give you a little bit of a special deal. We're going to sweeten the deal for you just a little bit. So don't fail to go ahead and order, all right? More inventory is coming. In fact, it's due in on Tuesday. So we'll be filling these orders ASAP. And I apologize for this. You know, it's a good problem, it's a bad problem. It's a fantastic problem that so many of you have responded to the offer. It's a bad deal that my printer has been so slow in getting inventory to me. Hey, I'm out of time. Thanks so much for joining me. We're going to have more tomorrow on The Kingdom of Heaven is Like. Don't want to miss it, so I'll see you on the flip side.